Hi everyone! In this video we will knit this mitts. I chose this project because it's quick to knit while using basic techniques you can reuse after that to knit sweaters, hats. I will go into the detail of each step, so feel free to choose the chapter according to your progress. I will put the timeline in the information below the video. First, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Lauriane. I design knitting patterns, Lauriane et Charlie. You can see my work on Instagram, Ravelry. I hope you will like this video. In this case, don't forget to subscribe. First of all, we need yarn, needles, markers, or you can use paper clips, waste yarn, and a needle. I used Romeo from Emilia et Philomène. I chose this yarn because it's sticky and it gives 22 stitches for 10 centimeters as requested in the pattern. It's the unit of measurement for the thickness of the yarn. You can also use for this pattern Perfect from Sanders Garn or Merino Extra Fine from Drops. For the needles, you will need a cable of 60 centimeters and needles a size 3.5 and also needles size 3 to knit the rib stitch. With the smallest needles, I will cast on 50 stitches using long tail cast on. I will take a sufficient length, about 3 feet, and I will make a slip knot. So I turn the threads and I'm going to pick up the thread and slip it through the loop. A slip knot is a knot that unties when we pull on the thread. So I'll do it again. With my 2 fingers I turn the yarn to create a loop and I'm going to slip the yarn through the loop. So I place the loose length in front of me and I will slip the needle into the knot. This is the first stitch. So I hold the yarn with my 2 fingers, my thumb and forefinger. The yarn from the ball is on my forefinger. I will first pass the needle under the thumb and then I will take the yarn from the forefinger and pass it through the loop of the thumb. Then I only have to pull and I created the second stitch. So again, I bring the needle under the thumb. I will take the yarn from the forefinger and I will pass it through the loop and I just pull. I created my first stitch and I start again. And we go on to get 50 stitches on the needle. I check that I have 50 stitches. Okay, so next step, place a marker for beginning of round and joining a round. So here we are in the situation where the round is smaller than the total length of the cable, so we will use the magic loop technique. We will place half of the stitches on the left needle and the other half will stay on the cable. So I separate the stitches in two. So we have to be careful that the stitches cast on at the beginning stay inside. I will place the marker for beginning of round. I check that the stitches stay towards the inside. And I will knit my first stitch. I tighten this first stitch. And then I purl. I move the yarn to the back to knit the next stitch. And then again, I purl. And then I'll continue to knit and purl to create a rib stitch. And I will go on like this to work all the stitches on my left needle. I finish with a knit stitch. And finally a purl stitch. Then I'm going to slip the stitches on the cable. And I will put the stitches of the cable back on the left needle to knit them. So I pull gently on the cable to slip the stitches on the left needle. So I finished on a purl stitch, so I will start again with a knit stitch to continue the weaving. So I finish my round with a purl stitch. This is my first round. I'm careful not to drop the marker for beginning of round. I know that I've done a full round when I reach the marker. I check that I didn't twist the stitches, that the stitches cast on at the very beginning are still turned toward the inside. And then I go on with the magic loop technique. I separate the stitches in two. Half of the stitches with the yarn stay on the cable. And we're going to place the other half on the left needle. I don't forget to place the marker, and I'm going to start with a knit stitch. Knit stitches and purl stitches look different. A knit stitch looks like a V. They form a braid, so that's how you can identify knit stitches. The purl stitches form like waves. You can easily identify them with these little waves. So if you wonder if you have to knit or purl, just look if you have a braid of waves on the next stitch. I finish with a purl stitch. So I put the stitches back on the cable using the magic loop technique, and I will slip the stitches to knit back on the left needle. I leave the other half on the cable and I resume the ribbing. I start with a knit stitch. Then I purl and I will alternate to form the ribbing until the end of the round. So there I finished the second round and I will continue the ribbing to obtain a wrist of 8 centimeters or 3 inches. So we separate the stitches and we're going to use the bigger needles. I will transfer all the stitches, knitting them with the biggest needle. So first I knit 4, and when I knit, each stitch will be transferred to the new needle. So I knit 4, and then I will knit 2 stitches together. I take the next 2 stitches, I insert the needle from front to back, and I knit them together. So I reduced 1 stitch, I made 1 decrease. So I go on, I knit 4, then I knit 2 together, again I knit 4, I knit 2 together, 1 decrease, again knit 2 together, and 1 stitch. And then I slip the stitches on the needle to knit them. And the other half on the cable, I use the magic loop technique to have more flexibility. I have knit 1 stitch, so I have 3 stitches left. 1, 2, 3, a decrease, and then we work to the end. I finished the round, knit 2 together. I still have 2 stitches left to knit. And now I have transferred all the stitches on the bigger needles. I use magic loop again. I place the marker for beginning of round. And I need 22 stitches if I follow the instructions for the right hand. So I need 22 stitches. I will place the thumb marker. So use a different color, not like me, it will be easier to identify the thumb marker. And we end up with 20 stitches. So I finished the round, and now I will start to follow the instructions for the butterfly stitch and the thumb increases. So round number 1, for the butterfly stitch, we knit the entire round. And we see that the thumb increases only start at round 7, so no increase. I don't forget the marker, and I can start to knit. Now I start round number 2, I knit the entire round, and I'm going to follow with rounds 3 and 4, which are identical. So now I made 4 rounds in stockinette stitch, and on round number 5 I'm going to start the butterfly stitch. So I start by knitting 8. I have the 8 stitches on my needle. Then I'm going to bring the yarn to the front. So I move the yarn from the back to the front. I slip 5 stitches on my right needle. And I will move the yarn from the front to the back to form the first strand of the butterfly stitch loosely. And then I resume knitting until the end of the round. Round 6, I knit the entire round. Round 7, I'm going to make the second strand of the butterfly stitch, and we're going to start the thumb increases. So first of all, I will knit 8. Then I bring the yarn to the front. I slip 5 stitches on the right needle. And I move the yarn from the front to the back to create the second strand of the butterfly, keeping it loose enough. And I resume knitting. I will start to follow the instruction for the thumb increases. So I knit up to the marker. And I'm going to do a make one right increase. I lift the strand between the 2 stitches and I put it on the left needle from front to back. Then I insert the right needle in the front loop and I'm going to knit it to twist the stitch. And there I created a stitch. And the increase leans to the right. I slip the marker, I knit 1, and I will make a make one left increase. I lift the strand between the 2 stitches, and this time I'm going to put it on the left needle from back to front. I knit the strand through the back loop to twist it. And we made an increase. This time the increase leans to the left. And then I resume knitting until the end of the round. So round 8, I knit the entire row and no thumb increase. Round 9, we will create the third strand of the butterfly stitch and we will also realize thumb increases. So I knit 8. I bring the yarn to the front and I slip 5 stitches. I put the yarn at the back and I created the third strand. And I can start knitting again. As before, I will knit to the marker, where I will do the thumb increases. So I make one right, I leave the strand between the 2 stitches to place it on the needle from front to back. And I insert the needle in the front loop and I knit the new stitch. I slip the marker, knit 1, make one left, I leave the strand between the 2 stitches, I put it on the needle from back to front, I insert the needle in the back loop and I knit this new stitch. and we continue until the end of the round. Round 10, this is the last round of the butterfly stitch, so I'm going to need 10 stitches. So I have 10 stitches on my needle. With the right needle, I will lift the 3 loose strands of the butterfly from bottom to top. Then I knit the next stitch, but rather loosely, and I take the right needle back down through the 3 loose strands. And there I created the butterfly stitch. And you can resume knitting to the end of the round because there is no thumb increase. There we can see the thumb increases. So on one side we have make one right increases, and on the other side make one left increases. So I realized the 10 rounds of the butterfly stitch, and I'm going to make twice more. We're going to use the same pattern, so for round 11 it will be identical to round 1, so I will knit the entire round. On the other hand, as it's round 11, we will have thumb increases. So I knit up to the marker, make one right, I slip the marker, knit one, make one left, and I knit to the end of the round. Round 12, identical to round 2, so I knit the entire round and no thumb increase. Round 13, I knit and thumb increases. Round 14, I knit the entire round and no thumb increase. Round 15, same as round 5, we are going to make the first strand of the butterfly stitch. So I knit 8 stitches. And I bring the yarn to the front. I slip 5 stitches. And I bring the yarn to the back. And I can start knitting again. I knit up to the marker, make one right, slip the marker, knit one, make one left, and I knit. Round 16, I knit the entire round and no thumb increase. Round 17, we will realize the second strand of the butterfly and we will also make the last thumb increases. So I knit 8 stitches. I place the yarn forward. I slip 5 stitches. I bring the yarn to the back and I knit. I knit up to the thumb marker to make the last increases. So now I finished the thumb increases, so I will check my stitch count. I should have 54. A few rounds later, I'm now at round 20. I realized rounds 18 and 19. I've made the third strand of the butterfly stitch. So round 20, we will complete the butterfly stitch. So I start by knit turn. So I lift the 3 strand with the right needle. I knit the next stitch loosely. I bring the needle down and I knit. And here is my second butterfly. Round 21, same as round 1, we're going to knit the entire round. On the other hand, in round 21 we will also separate the thumb. So we knit 22 stitches for the right hand. So here I have 22 stitches. And the next step will be to slip the 13 thumb stitches on waste yarn. Here I have my 13 stitches and I'm going to slip them on waste yarn to put them on hold. So I will need my needle. And I will thread waste yarn through the thumb stitches. So next I will cast on one stitch to close the thumb with a backward loop cast on. So with my thumb I will create a loop. I turn the yarn around my thumb and with my right needle I'm going to cut this loop. That will become my new stitch. Here is my new stitch. And then I knit to the end of the round. On my cable I must have 42 stitches now. I will continue with the instructions for round 22, same as round 2. Then I will create the third butterfly stitch and I will join you at round number 30 to complete the third butterfly stitch. So first I knit 10 stitches. I will lift the 3 strands with the right needle. I knit the next stitch loosely. I bring the needle down under the 3 strands and I knit the next stitches. So here is my third butterfly. After the third butterfly, I will make 2 rounds in stockinette stitch and then I will change the needle to make the ribbing. So here I knit 2 rounds in stockinette stitch and now I'm going to change needles for rib stitch. For rib stitch we will use smaller needles. This way we will have tighter ribbing around the fingers. So as at the beginning of the project we will transfer the stitches on the new needles by knitting them. I knit ribbing, so I'm going to knit the first stitch and then purl. And now all the stitches are transferred on the new needles. So I'm going to finish by making 4 centimeters of ribs or 1.5 inches. And if you have little hands like me, you can stop before. The good thing is that you can try it. I think that's enough. So I'm going to finish the round and then we're going to bind off the stitches. So now, time to bind off. We will start by knitting the first 2 stitches as they come. So here we have a knit stitch and then a purl stitch. And we are going to pass the first stitch over the second. So we've done the first stitch, I go on. The next one is a knit stitch, so I knit. And I slip the right stitch over the left stitch. And you can go on like this until the end of the round. When I change needles, I am careful not to drop the stitch, and I slip the stitches on the left needle so I can go on to the end of the round. Last stitch. So here I am, a complete bind off, and I can take the needle out, being careful not to close the last loop. I cut the yarn and I will pull it through. So now there are no loops remaining. We pull gently, and then we will weave in the ends after knitting the thumb. So now we will put the stitches back on the cable to make the thumb. We will also use the magic loop technique, but on a much smaller round. So we have put the 13 stitches back on the cable, so we can pull out the yarn. And the next step will be to pick up 3 stitches inside the thumb. So first I put the mitten on the right side. And in this area, I'm going to take 3 V's. I will put the needle inside the V and I will show you how to pick up a stitch. So in this way we have a reversed V. Then I stick the needle. And I will wrap the yarn around the needle. And to pick up a stitch, we slip the needle through the V, and here I pick up 1 stitch. I will pick the reversed V right next to it. I wrap the yarn around the needle. Pass it through the V. So there I picked up a second stitch. And I'm going to do the same thing. I look for the reversed V next to it. I wrap the yarn around the needle and I pick up a third stitch. And then I will resume knitting the thumb, so I do as before with the rest of the mitt. I will use the magic loop technique. So first I separate the stitches in 2. Here I slide the stitches on the left needle to knit them. And I can knit. The only difficulty is that there are very few stitches, so you just have to knit slowly to avoid dropping the stitches. But we use the same magic loop technique as for the rest of the mitt. So here I have the 3 stitches that I have previously picked up. I knit them and I will tighten well to avoid forming a hole. And I keep on knitting in stockinette stitch on 6 rounds before starting rib stitch. So I finish my 6th round. And there we're going to change the needle. So as before, we will transfer the stitches on the new cable on the smaller needles. The difficulty is that there are very few stitches, so you just have to knit slowly. So 1 knit stitch, 1 purl stitch, and then I make the weaving using the magic loop technique on 6 rounds. So here I finish the 6 rounds in rib stitch, and all I have to do is bind off. I can cut the yarn and tighten the knot. And here is the knife thong. So the last step, I just have to weave in ends. First, we turn the meat inside out to be able to weave in ends on the back side. We will start with the ends at the wrist. You see there's a little jog, we'll try to correct. So I take the cut end and we will create a stitch to correct this jog. So I go under 2 legs at the beginning of the round. I pull it tight to correct the jog. And you can see that the jog has already disappeared. And then I go back in close to where the end came out. And then I will just slip the end around the ribs through the stitches, knowing that the knot was already tight. So I'm just going to slide it through the stitches. And this way we maintain the elasticity and it's not visible on the other side. So we just have to cut. We are going to do the same thing for this end. Here we see that there is also a jog at the end of the round, so we will correct this jog using the same technique. So I take the cut end. You see that the bind off created a chain of V's that we will use to weave in the end. I go under 2 legs at the beginning of the round. I pull slightly to correct the jog. And then I go back in close to where the end came out. And that will form a new V. This way we have a continuation of the V's and at the same time we fix the jog. And like earlier, I will slip the end through the stitches. Now for the last loose ends, we will use exactly the same technique. So there we have a jog between the beginning and the end of the last round. So I will go under 2 legs at the beginning of the round. Like this, and I pull tight. Then I go back in and I will form a new V. I go under the 2 legs and I pull tight. And I slip the end through the stitches. For the last end, when the stitches were picked up, here we form the hole. And we're going to use the last end to help us close this hole. So we will weave in the ends on reverse stockinette stitch. And in fact, the reverse stockinette form like bridges. And we have like balls. And to maintain the elasticity, we will put the needle into the bridge and then put it into a ball right above it, while pulling slightly on the end to close the hole. So we put the needle into a bridge and then into a ball. and I pull slightly. And then I will go down into a ball right on the left, here. And down into the bridge. And I pull it through. And up into the bridge right next to it on the left. Back into the same ball and I pull it through. Down into the ball. You can see that I follow the bridge. And the new loop will be just in front of the bridge, so this way we won't see the yarn on the other side. Then up into the bridge just on the left, back into the same ball, and I create the same ball. The yarn covers this ball. So next I check that I've closed the hole on the back and on the right side. So it's perfect. You can't see the hole anymore. So I cut the end and I have my beautiful mitts. You see the thumb increases, the rib stitch, a nice butterfly stitch. Beautiful mitts.